Hi, welcome to this new showcase organized during the DSA Summit. My name is Marta Suarez. I am the president of the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance, and I would like to welcome you for this new session titled Respond, Recover, Reimagine, Accelerating Progress Towards the Sustainable Development Goals during COVID-19. This session will be moderated by Fatema Kothari. Fatima is a senior program manager at the Airband Initiative at Microsoft, and she will lead this discussion today. So, Fatima, thank you very much for accepting our invite and for joining us during this session. The floor is yours.
That's awesome. Thank you, Marta. Hi, everyone. My name is Fatima, and as Marta mentioned, I'm a senior program manager with Microsoft's Airband Initiative. I'll also be your moderator for this morning's DSA Summit session. If you're unfamiliar with the Airband Initiative, our mission is to partner with telecom equipment makers, internet and energy access providers, and local entrepreneurs to make affordable broadband access a reality for unserved communities around the world. Within the US, our partners are projected to cover at least 3 million unserved people in rural US areas by July 2022. And through our international partnerships, we're projected to extend internet connectivity to at least 40 million people by July 2022. So over the next 45 minutes, you'll hear from three partners of the Microsoft Airband Initiative: Mawingu Networks in Kenya, our partner BLUETOWN in Ghana, and Anditel in Colombia, about their efforts to advance connectivity and the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, during the pandemic and solve some of the greatest challenges together through innovation, investment, and partnerships. So we'll kick it off with Bryan Kariuki, who serves as managing director at Mawingu Networks, overseeing their fundraising and partnerships. Mawingu is a Microsoft Airband partner, which is solving the business model and infrastructure challenges of bringing high quality and affordable internet access to rural areas in Africa. In addition to Mawingu, Bryan has worked in multiple parts of the technology value chain, from advising organizations to tech strategy at McKinsey & Company, to launching e-commerce startups at Rocket Internet, and to scaling a mobile commerce business while being CEO for Cellulant Kenya. So with that introduction, over to you, Bryan.
Thank you, Fatima. It's a pleasure to participate on this panel. Thank you for having me. I'm sitting here in Nanyuki, which is a town 3 hours north of Nairobi, with a population of 80,000, which is actually one of the largest population centers that we serve. And we do so across 10 counties in Kenya, with a population under cover of 9 million people. And for as little as 10 US cents a month, next slide, our users get access to life-changing connectivity. And our customers include individuals, such as a woman in Nanyuki who has a disabled child who was unable to do her secondary schooling from school and use one of our public Wi-Fi hotspots to study from home. And today she's studying medicine at one of the local universities. It's a great story. Our customers include businesses such as a digital center in Narumoro town, not too far from here, which provides access to online resources such as e-government services for 300 people in its community. Now, customers also include homes, such as this gentleman you can see here, who is a livestock farmer in rural Isiolo, who lives in this mud house, which he built himself, with no TV. He once had one, which is why he has that dish on top of his roof. He has no running water. He doesn't even have electricity, so he has to use solar for his connectivity. But he's so progressive that not only has he gotten an internet connection from Mawingu, he proudly proclaimed that he would even let his wife use the internet connection. And since we started in 2012, we have continually refined a business model and a technology model which allow us to sustainably provide connectivity in these places. Microsoft has been an incredible support through this journey, not least through our participation in their Airband Initiative for rural broadband connectivity. Now, next slide. The universal provision of connectivity is absolutely critical in order for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Insofar as people need to get access to information and need to be able to share knowledge that is built up elsewhere and also contribute to the development of knowledge, universal connectivity is an indirect enabler for all the SDGs. However, universal connectivity is a direct enabler for 8 SDGs, and I've numbered them there. I'll be speaking about one in particular later in my presentation, and that's the 3rd SDG around good health and well-being. This recent and incredible COVID crisis is a perishable opportunity for the acceleration of plans for the provision of universal connectivity. And consequently, it is a fantastic and perishable opportunity for the acceleration of the Sustainable Development Goals. This opportunity will not be around forever. It will expire. Next slide. Now, how COVID has presented itself as an opportunity is in multiple ways, and I'd like to focus on 3 of those ways. The first is that COVID has focused public officers on the urgent need for connectivity. I'll speak about that. The second is that COVID has unlocked the availability of resources for providers such as ourselves for deployment of infrastructure in more equitable ways. And the third way in which COVID has presented this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to accelerate progress towards the achievement of the SDGs is that COVID has increased the priority of home broadband as a need for people who would never have considered it. And I'm going to touch on each of these. Next slide. Now, the first thing that COVID has done is that it has focused political will on a few key things. The problem here is that though on the one hand, public projects, those that are sponsored and run by state, present the best opportunity for impact at scale, on the other hand, we all know that public projects take a tremendously long time. And what COVID has done is that it has focused political will, that is the actions of the decision makers, on a few critical things. Connectivity is one of them. And in order to illustrate this, I'd like to describe to you what we have been doing in the county in which Mawingu is based, which is Laikipia County, which is more or less the gateway into northern Kenya. It's a county about the size of New Hampshire state in the US. And there are about 500,000 people that live in this county. These people are served by 85 health centers. But how it has worked is that a select few, mainly the 2 hospitals that are in the main urban areas in Laikipia, and then a few others, have seen all the resources concentrated within those facilities. All the doctors are there, all the medicines are there, and if you live in rural Laikipia and you fall ill, what you want to do is you want to get to one of the main health centers as quickly as possible, which obviously defeats the purpose of having such a distributed network of clinics. Now, COVID happened, and suddenly the county government didn't want people moving around in order that they might control the spread of the disease. And the government did indeed have pre-existing plans for the provision of universal health coverage. But they saw an opportunity in COVID for them to accelerate those plans. We went to them, we spoke with them. The government was incredibly progressive. And what they did was something that is quite rare in dealing with government, which is they moved from a discussion around a desire and a desire for a program and the design of that program to actual execution very, very quickly. They signed an agreement with us within weeks for the provision of connectivity at each and every one of the 85 health centers, which is something we have hardly seen. And the benefits are myriad. Let me highlight three. The first is that once each and every one of these health facilities has a high-speed internet connection, the county will be able to make use of teleconferencing platforms such as Microsoft Teams for remote consultations, so that remotely located patients don't need to go to the urban centers and can be seen by quality doctors without having to travel. The second benefit is that the health centers can now be plugged into inventory management systems so that the county can keep track of medicine levels remotely and replenish them far more efficiently. And the third benefit is that the centrally located senior health officials with whom we were holding discussions will be able to better manage their network of health centers. These are all benefits that will be unlocked by the provision of connectivity at each of these centers, and really is a fantastic demonstration of how COVID is an opportunity for the acceleration of the achievement of the SDGs. In this case, in particular, the third Sustainable Development Goal around good health and well-being. Next slide. And one thing I failed to mention on the last slide is that we will also be making use of TV white spaces, because some of these places are incredibly difficult to reach, and we cannot reach them with typical wireless technologies. Microsoft has been incredibly supportive of this project, and in addition to Microsoft, the UK government's Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, in particular their Digital Access Program, have supported us with resourcing to unlock this project, which speaks to the next point that I want to make, which is that the second thing that COVID has done is that it has unlocked resources that were previously very difficult for us to access, right? And here the problem is that though people in rural areas have the same needs for broadband consumption, I mean, they're doing the same things with the internet. They want to educate themselves. They want to watch videos that they are sent, and so on. These people have nowhere near the same investment in infrastructure to enable that consumption. And that is simply because in order for infrastructure to give a return, it typically needs to be deployed in high density areas. Now, what has happened with COVID is that a lot of the providers of non-commercial resources have suddenly come forward and have enabled us to extend our network to unserved areas. And then after that, to sustain the coverage with our innovative business and technology model for these low density areas. And this is fantastic because we are now providing life-changing connectivity to people who are previously left behind, and with less of a burden on them to meet the cost of infrastructure deployment. These are things that are enabled by the fantastic support that we have received, once again, from Microsoft's Airband Initiative, from the FCDO, and we look forward to partnering with many more organizations in order for us to complete the project, such as the one that in particular, the project I spoke about with the Laikipia county government, the health clinics, where we still have a funding gap. Next slide. And the third thing that COVID has done is that COVID has suddenly made broadband very, very important. And here the problem is that even though the benefits of connectivity in terms of socioeconomic outcomes for its users far outweigh the costs, especially at the rates at which Mawingu offers it, connectivity has often lost the battle for limited resources with our users in these markets to less, let me say, net positive recreational options. COVID has now forced people to stay at home, and they haven't been able to stay at home without the internet. And what then happens for us is that the business case for deployment of infrastructure to unreached areas has become far more positive. As a result, over the last 6 months, we have doubled the number of people that we reach with broadband connections. And the people that we are reaching with these broadband connections are now able to benefit from those connections and gain the socioeconomic outcomes that we are all aware of. Right, so it has changed the sort of the trade-off between broadband and some of the other things that were priority for people in our markets, and this is fantastic. Now, this opportunity that I've just articulated is not going to remain forever. And next slide, please. There is a distinct difference between the two types of responses to this opportunity, right? The one group the one type of response that we have seen from some of our partners is that they have adapted their traditional processes to accommodate the challenges and opportunities of the time, right? Which then enables us to move fast and to meet the challenge now. The other response we have seen is one where some of our partners have been very willing and very open to declaring commitment to COVID efforts, but have been unable or unwilling to change their way of doing things. And this is unfortunate because by the time they come around to actually organizing themselves and applying their resources to the problem, and the benefits of that comes to bear on the problem, the response efforts will have come too late. So each of us need to decide, and I'm speaking to the audience today, we all need to decide, this is as a connectivity provider, as somebody who, or an organization that provides resources to our connectivity provider, as regulators, we all need to decide where we fall between these two responses. And we will decide that through action. Unfortunately, we don't have long to act. Or fortunately, because we all want COVID to go away. Once COVID goes away, the opportunity will have expired. So we have a once in a lifetime, 12, maybe 14-month opportunity to move fast in order that we might accelerate our progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'd like to challenge you who is listening to this today and who is watching this today to decide which of these two responses you will take. And failure to act quickly will simply lie in your inability or unwillingness to recognize or respond to the understanding that COVID is a perishable opportunity for the acceleration of plans for universal connectivity, and therefore the acceleration of the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks for that rallying call to action, Bryan. Next, we'll hear from Lene Schulze, who leads all US-based activities for BLUETOWN, a global internet provider, as well as our partner in Ghana. And we'll hear about their efforts to connect the unconnected. Lena's responsibilities include building and driving new global partnerships as well as revenue opportunities. Before joining BLUETOWN, Lene created the Silicon Valley Innovation Outpost for Monitor Deloitte Nordic. She started her career with the Danish government, co-founding their first international innovation center, and through that built programs for cooperations and startups, including Scale It, and joined Norwegian, Swedish, and Finnish colleagues in co-founding the Nordic Innovation House. So with that, over to Lene to learn more about BLUETOWN.
Thank you, Fatema. Thank you for that kind introduction. And thank you to Microsoft for inviting us to be part of this panel today. I'd like to start this presentation by talking about BLUETOWN, talking about some of the challenges as well as opportunities that we've experienced during this time of crisis. And I'd also like to spend some of this time talking about the impact work that we are doing together with partners in the markets where we operate, and why that is maybe even more important in these times of COVID. Next slide, please. So BLUETOWN is a last mile connectivity provider connecting the unconnected around the world. And in fact, connecting the unconnected has been our mission from day one. So that means that we are working in previously or at least underserved areas. It can be examples like you see here in rural, remote areas, and sometimes in semi-urban areas. And that really means that we have to focus on bringing down both CapEx and OpEx levels in order to create sustainable business in these often low population density areas, and also, at least to start with, low ARPU markets. We are therefore, among other things, highly dependent, and I say this in the audience that I'm in today, we are extremely highly dependent on license-free spectrum. We work mainly with Wi-Fi technology and also white spaces through the collaboration with Microsoft. And other ways of building on the solution side for us to bring down cost is to ensure that we start out by building very robust solutions that are often solar powered. And finally, our key to success as a business is to be able to scale. We think in a multi-market strategy, and we believe that that is necessary in order not just for us to build a business around connectivity in rural areas, but also in order to truly move the needle when it comes to connecting the more than 3 billion people that are still connected in this world. So scaling for us is key. Will you move to the next slide, please? So very briefly about BLUETOWN, we are headquartered in Copenhagen, Denmark, but we are seeing that much more of the activities and the growth that we have moving forward is in our markets, especially the markets where we are starting to scale. Today, those markets are in particular India and Ghana, and my focus for this presentation is obviously Ghana, because that is the project that we are working together with Microsoft on. We are currently deploying 2,000 sites in partnership with the Microsoft Airband team, and we expect to have about 2 million people under coverage before next summer there. Next slide. And before I move on, I just also want to introduce you to another part of our solution, which is more than just providing internet connectivity. A key part of our solution is something we call our local cloud. It's basically an edge server that is located either on our towers or in some cases even closer to the end users. What it does is that it makes content readily available to access for end users, even end users with very low digital literacy. There's no charge for the end user. We do not need to access backhaul, or they do not need to access backhaul in order to access this content. And that also means we can bring in high resolution content. So for instance, high quality video can be streamed multiple times at the same time, because we are not using the very limited bandwidth that we have available. And then of course, partners or ourselves can upload this content in off-peak hours. It's just an important part of our introductions that I wanted to make sure that you also understand for my talk ahead. Next slide, please. And it's been an important part of our solution in relation to COVID. So what we have done through the local cloud is that we've been able to disseminate information about COVID-19 into the communities we serve. We've, since the beginning of the pandemic, made content from trusted sources such as WHO and the Ghanaian government available for free. And this is content that can help educate on different measures to take during the pandemic, but also general information and updates about the pandemic that are very important to people, especially in rural areas of Ghana. And being on the topic of the global pandemic, I also thought that I would include in my talk today just a few areas where we've been affected by this pandemic. And like any business and like any industry, we definitely have been affected. We are used to our work being very challenging. As many of you in the audience here today know, that there's a reason why we are not, we have still not connected half of the world's population, and it is challenging, and we're used to those challenges. However, over the last months, we have definitely seen and met more obstacles than we are used to, but also seen opportunities, as Bryan alluded to before. Well, for us as a company, for one, we are a growth stage company. So we were actually in March 2020 in the middle of a fundraising round that abruptly came to a halt. But on the positive side, or the upside of this, we did manage to raise the funding that we needed, and actually we did that in help from the Danish government through some of their stimulus packages that allowed the Danish Growth Fund to issue loans on the back of equity from other investors. Operations-wise, we've definitely been challenged, like anyone else, by the close down of countries. For one, our country manager wasn't able to enter Ghana for a while. But also in country, as I mentioned before, we are in the process of deploying 2,000 sites. And that, for a while at least, came also to a halt. We were not able to go do site service or visit the new sites that we were deploying in. Actually, for a while, we were not even able to go and go to our existing sites and do basic maintenance and service. So there has been many challenges, also challenges around shipping, getting equipment into the country that we've had to overcome. And I think that things are moving along and things are opening up, and we are in fact now deploying again, despite still being in this crisis. And on the revenue side and also the impact side of the work we do, the close down and also the restrictions have definitely also had implications. So part of our strategy is to, when we go into new markets, is to build hotspots. It's a big part of how we build business in new communities, is the strategy where we build hotspots in areas where people usually congregate. And that way people come online the first time or the first many times and get familiar with the internet. And of course, people have not been able to congregate, making it hard for us to get more people online. And another part also of our strategy is to work with anchor customers. So we work with schools or businesses or local governments. And since the schools are out, and they're still out in Ghana, businesses are still to some extent closed. We have not been able to, even installations we have made, customers we actually have in the books, we have not been able to provide them service yet. But on the upside, just like Bryan was talking about, we definitely see then that there are other things that are moving along, and maybe moving along faster than we had dared to hope for in these new markets. And of course, that is the home broadband market is doing really well. And the other thing is that there are also schools that are now taking initiatives to do more online learning and also home learning, so that they ensure that their students are able to also do homework from home. So definitely also a lot of opportunities in this process. And of course, so a lot of the awareness we do when we go into new market is to create events, bring people together, both for just basic internet, but also for the impact initiatives we are doing. And that has been troubling as well, to be able to do that and create that awareness that we need to make when we go into new markets. There's one more quote on this slide. I don't know if you can get it forward. If you press once, okay. So I included this a quote by Tim Berners-Lee because I think it is so saying that this crisis has really made it clearer than ever that access to the internet should be a universal right. He actually goes on in this article in The Guardian earlier this year to say that it's fundamentally unfair that there are some of us that are not affected in great ways of this crisis, at least on a daily basis. We are able to work from home. We are able to go to school from home. We are able to socialize with friends from home. But there are people in this world who does not have that opportunity. And that is unfair. So I think, if anything, I believe that this crisis has underscored the importance of the work that we all do. And I would like to spend the rest of this talk talking about what work really needs to be done in order to also truly make an impact in the markets that we go into, and ensure that many more people come online over the next years to come. Next slide. So talking about impact, in some ways you could imagine that focusing on impact is something that could be put on the back burner in this time of crisis, with all the challenges we are facing on just creating business of getting people online. But in fact, that's not the approach that we have decided to take at BLUETOWN. And there is a very good reason for that. For us, working to create impact in our community is not something that we think as a nice to have, like an add-on. But it's basically a part of the work we do, and it is necessary. It basically makes business sense for us to ensure that as many people as possible benefit from the internet. Next slide, please. So our approach, other than bringing the internet to previously unserved or underserved areas, is to address all the key barriers for internet access. And those we have experienced go well beyond just the lack of connectivity or just the lack of affordable connectivity, for that matter. And as I just mentioned, by addressing these areas, we are able to bring more people online, which in turn can create the opportunity for a viable business in these areas with very low population density, and at least to start with, low ARPU opportunity areas as well. So I should say that addressing these barriers in combination with bringing in the anchor customers that I mentioned before, and the content and service providers through our local cloud is really what creates a viable business for us. And working to overcome these barriers is not something we can do alone. We need to collaborate with a wide range of partners who each bring different contributions to the initiatives that we are working on together. So please, next slide. And this slide is not the best, is fairly small letters here, but I just do really want to highlight the importance of that ecosystem thinking for closing the connectivity gap. We know that one last mile connectivity provider like ourselves cannot do this alone. And we don't believe that any other player in each of the categories that are mentioned here can do it alone either. We are facing a major challenge, COVID or not, and that challenge needs to be solved. And as Tim Berners-Lee said, it's unfair. And we don't believe it's just unfair. It's also necessary for us to connect the rest of the world to be able to move closer to reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. So next slide, please. And as I mentioned, we are working on a number of different impact initiatives, and we are doing that with partners. We are working on initiatives around more productive agriculture, higher quality education, better health outcomes, all through digital means. And of course, as I said, every single one of them are done in collaboration with partners from each of the categories that I mentioned before. So I want to conclude by bringing one project in specific to attention. If you could move to the next slide. So to conclude, I want to highlight one of our projects that I'm personally very invested in. It's a project that we are creating together with the Microsoft team and also a number of other partners. And this is about ensuring that actually 50% of our potential customer base that are women also get internet access. We have a persistent problem, particularly in developing countries, and that is the digital gender gap. We have we have the digital divide in general, and then we have the digital gender gap. And we know by now from many studies that if we can economically empower women, we can make communities and even countries prosper. So it is so worth it to pay attention to, both for developing communities and countries, but also in order to create sustainable business that can ensure that we can have the internet in these new communities going forward. And luckily for us, there are ecosystem players, as I mentioned, Microsoft being one of them, but across the board of partner categories who are willing to work with us on creating these sustainable solutions. And we are right now working on creating a scalable solution that we can bring with us to new sites going forward, so that we ensure when we go to new sites that we can bring more women online. We can address this barrier of the digital divide, digital gender gap, and hopefully also in many cases overcome it. So final slides. With that, I will say thank you. Thank you for your time. You're welcome to reach out. And if you're interested in joining us in creating more impact and work together, closing the connectivity gap, please reach out to us anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, Lene, for sharing a little bit more about the ecosystem that it takes to connect the unconnected. If we want to go farther in our goals, we definitely need to do it together. And of course, I love to focus on SDG 5, gender equality. So thank you so much for talking to us a little bit about that. Our last speaker is Sylvia Jaramillo, General Manager at Anditel in Colombia. Born in Bogota, Colombia, and educated in the United States, Sylvia has over 20 years of experience working in the telecom industry. In the Americas, Sylvia held multiple roles within the strategy, marketing, and sales organizations at these companies, and has worked on consumer products, government projects, and both B2C as well as B2B telco businesses from the vendor and operator side. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Sylvia to take us through Anditel's journey through the pandemic.
Thank you, Fatima, and thank you for inviting me to speak here with you today. Anditel is an operator of telecommunication solutions and digital technology located in Colombia. Our purpose is to bridge the social divide with technology, and it has been our purpose since the beginning of this company. Next slide, please. Next slide. We have been serving Colombia for over 40 years, and we have been connecting the most remote places of Colombia through these times. We have specialized in deployment and operation of transformational ICT projects. All the pictures that you will see here are pictures taking our projects and our network. Next slide. We're experts in connectivity and alternative energy, and we have operator programs for the Colombian government and the technology ministry for over 17 years, in which we have had the opportunity of connecting over 15,000 rural schools. We have worked with the government and ministry, and we have evolved these projects in the rural areas, not only to include connectivity, but also to have, next slide please, programs with technological and social appropriation. We have learned through these times of these projects that the connectivity by itself doesn't transform people's lives, that we need to accompany the projects, the people, the schools, the children in finding ways to have a real impact in their lives. Next slide, please. We have networks that cover 70% of rural Colombia, and we're in the capacity to connect anyone, anywhere in the country. The connection is not a problem. When we find the problem is who pays for the connectivity and how can we make it sustainable over time. Next slide. Thinking about this question and how COVID has changed it, and how from our position here have we responded, recovered, and reimagined. Next slide. We have seen, like my fellow panelists, that COVID has changed the world we used to know in everywhere, in every sense. Here in Colombia, we were in lockdown for almost 7 months. I think the longest lockdown of all. We see that probably 20% of business could go bankrupt. We see an unemployment rate rising to almost 17%. We see the GDP going down by almost 16 points. We have all the public schools closed, and all of the public schools are still closed today. And we see a very low internet penetration in rural areas of 16%. We have seen that everything has changed: the business environment, the rules, the schools, the speed, the investment priorities from the government, the companies, the people. Everything has changed. And it has made it very clear that it is critical to have internet access and connectivity. People cannot get education, health, businesses cannot progress without internet access and connectivity. So the question is, how can we give access to the rural areas, and how can we make it sustainable? Who's responsible for bringing this connectivity? Who has to pay for it? Because the need is clear, but who pays for it and who makes it sustainable is the question that we need to answer. Next slide, please. How are we supporting the Sustainable Development Goals through this pandemic? Next slide. We have seen that through our projects, we're helping with 3 of the goals: quality of education, gender equality, and industry and innovation deployment of infrastructure through our networks. Next slide. As it was mentioned, we are partners with Microsoft for the Airband Initiative, and this initiative and this work has enabled us to impact these goals. Next slide, please. In 2019, last year, we partnered with Microsoft to deploy Airband in Colombia. As they have mentioned, Airband Initiative, and everybody knows by now, brings affordable broadband access to everyone. Colombia was the first Latin American country to regulate TV white space, thanks to the interest and good work from the Colombian government and the need to close this digital divide. So with these 2 milestones, we decided that our objective was to implement the high-impact connectivity projects, especially designed to close this digital gap in rural Colombia and transform people's lives through technology. We have 7 major things that we want to concentrate on, that we review every time we see and look for a project. We look for digital transformation. We look for high-impact projects, life-changing. We need our projects to change the lives of the people we're serving. Value generators, what this connectivity can bring to this family and these people. How can this connectivity be profitable in a way that people get better at their jobs, and it's sustainable over time? And how can we make it transformational? Next slide, please. We do it a little different than the other initiatives from the Airband Initiative. We have decided that we're going to partner with other companies that have the same interests that we have. So we form stronger partnerships together and make projects that change people's lives. We are formulating projects, or we're taking existing projects where we can utilize our resources and expertise in technology and connectivity, in all the different programs and expertise that Microsoft has, and we find sustainable growth and digital transformation in this project. What do we look for? We look to increase internet coverage in the country and in the rural areas. We want to find life-changing stories. We want to see how this connectivity and these programs really change and impact the people's life. And we want to impact economic development through technology. We want to increase people's income in rural areas so they stay in the rural areas, and we maintain the equilibrium of the society. Next slide, please. The applications are endless. One's having the connectivity, and one's having the ICT training and basic training. We see applications in technical training, and we see farm applications that will increase and better farms. We see telemedicine, we see Internet of Things, quality of education, e-commerce. We see bringing the government closer to the communities so they can do everything through technology and the government applications. We see an opportunity for entertainment. We see digital platforms that can be utilized and applied to every single thing. And we see entrepreneurship from the farms and from the rural areas that will change their lives. Next slide. We have a couple of programs that we're implementing right now, and they're focused on education, where we have had programs with STEAM education together with Microsoft, and we have implemented programs with Geek Girls in rural areas. One particular program, we trained 60 girls in Arauca, and it was a beautiful experience because these girls, it was a program designed to tell them, you can be whatever you can be. Dream, feel free to dream. And with those dreams and technology and applications and educations, you can be whatever you want to be in life. We have seen the importance of having additional computers, tablets, devices so people can connect. We have a program together with another partner that we're working with indigenous communities where we're doing ICT training, and they have a program to strengthen their cultural heritage. So they feel empowered and they feel right, and they can use technology, but keeping their cultural heritage intact. We're working with gender equality together. We look for transformation. We want these women in these communities to have to be transformational agents for their communities, for their kids, for their families, and we want to see these women grow and help them become all their potential. We have partners that have agro-industrial business models that are designed to reduce extreme poverty and increase wellness and education by helping these farmers stay in rural areas. These programs are really amazing because they're designed to help these farmers increase their individual income, but 1.5 times the minimum wage, and this guarantees that they have a better quality of life, that they have better farms, they have better produce, and they're guaranteed the commercialization of this produce. Next slide, please. With our programs, we are implementing these programs around Colombia. You see the map there. We have around 10,000 households connected, and we're increasing those different connections around the country. Next slide, please. In each one of the programs, we do IC training because we see that this is one of the first things we need to do. We have developed IC training that is designed for them, with characters, with the way we speak, with things that these communities can relate. Each one of these people that you see in this slide belongs to one type of population in the different areas that we serve. So these contents are developed exactly for them, so they feel right and they feel comfortable with them. After this ICT training, we develop content that is relevant to the communities and that is relevant to their productive processes depending on the specifics of their life. Where are they located? What type of products they do? We have programs for coffee growers, for blackberry growers, for cocoa growers. So we focus all the training and all the content specifically to serve these people. Next slide, please. And one specific program that I wanted to talk to you about, Dan, next slide, please, is about a program that we're doing to achieve gender equality and empower women and girls, especially formulated for this goal number 5. Next slide. We have partnered with DI and with WGDP, and we're developing a program with Juan Valdez. I'm sure all of you have heard and have seen and have probably drank Juan Valdez coffee because it's a very iconic brand for Colombia. Next slide. Juan Valdez has a program to promote the social and economic empowerment of all women coffee growers through the commercialization of their coffee, encouraging good practices, associability, and caring for the environment with a gender equity approach. 30% of all coffee growers in Colombia are women, and they were not very visible at the beginning at the time. So Juan Valdez decided to do this program, and this was their first pilot that we're going to increase and implement to all or most of the women coffee growers, where they took 22 women coffee growers and they did a program where they trained them and helped them with everything to have better coffee and better lives. Next slide, please. They based this program in these 5 pillars: productivity, community empowerment, gender equality, environmental management, and quality and profitability. This comprehensive project was designed to impact women coffee growers' lives in all the areas that can be implemented. So it was a very concise plan. Next slide. What we're doing to help this plan is that we're developing a rural entrepreneurship platform. In this platform, we're giving them access to through connectivity to an LMS platform full of relevant content to them, from basic ICT training to how to grow their coffee, how to package it, how to sell it, with the appropriation training and connectivity. It will have 3 major pillars: introduction to ICT, entrepreneurship, and personal development, to help all these women grow and close this digital divide. Next slide. So the question is how to advance in connectivity and sustainable development goals during a global pandemic. Next slide. Through innovation, investment, and partnership with companies vested in Colombia and embedded in our culture, we're strengthening communities that will truly support SDGs. We can bridge the social divide with technology. We have seen it in Anditel. We have seen it with all of our projects, but it requires direct participation from the government and from the private sector to make these goals a reality. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Well, that was our last speaker. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for sharing a little bit more about Anditel as well as some of the work in progress. Thank you so much to our speakers, to summit organizers, and to you for hearing us present our ideas and updates. We're seeing greater involvement and definitely a renewed focus across countries, communities, and sectors to use the Sustainable Development Goals as a framework to recover better and to build a more resilient, just, and sustainable future for everyone. Please do reach out to us if we can work towards these goals together. Thank you again, and bye for now.